Thank you all for coming to listen to me. For those of you who don't know, I'm Jaclyn. I'm a bio major, and for my capstone, I chose to analyze size within mated weevil pairs. So just for some background information, a typical behavior in some insects is assortative mating, and that's a form of non-random mating according to phenotypic traits or characteristics. So that could look like size, color, and there's two different types of it. There's positive assortment, in which mates are more similar to each other, and there's negative assortment, in which mates are more dissimilar to each other. And I included the photo, so on the one side we have assortative mating, and you have a beetle mating with another with the exact same color, same phenotypic trait. And then on the other side you have random mating, which is just completely, could be color or any other factor, just completely random. So weevils feed on various different types of organisms and plants. So for my study specifically, I focused on spotted knapweed. This picture here is just a close-up of the flower and the specific characteristics to it. And it's native to Eastern Europe. It was most likely brought over as a contaminant of alfalfa seed. It's considered highly invasive and harmful. Its roots project toxic chemicals, which can be harmful for any other organisms in its neighboring habitat. It's considered a winter hardy, short-lived perennial plant with deep taproots, and it spreads entirely by seeds. So the bottom picture just shows the dense clumps that it can grow in. So for my study, the two species of weevils that I specifically looked at were Larinus obtusus and Larinus minutus. They're typically between 4 and 7 millimeters in length, and that's with the females being generally on the larger sides of that range and the males on the lower side. The adults reproduce mid to late summer, so that can be anywhere from late May to mid-August. And the adults will lay their eggs in the seed head, so that's that bottom portion there. And once the eggs hatch in the seed head, the larva will feed on all the seeds in there, and they'll pupate in there as well, and then they'll eventually emerge as adults. And that top photo there just shows the seed casing with no seeds in it, and that hole is actually where the larva will pupate within it. There's a lot of studies that talk about these weevils and other species as a biological control method, meaning that they feed strictly on the seeds of the plant, and because it's invasive, it's used to control the population and the density in certain areas. There's not much relating to studies about size relating with their mating habits, or analyzing any of that for that matter, so that's why I chose to do that. My main objective was to just analyze size within the weevils. Within that, I came across 3 questions I wanted to answer within, and the first one being, is there a correlation between male and female body size? Are the females generally larger in size? And is there a size advantage to mating? My hypothesis was, if size is analyzed, then females are expected to be larger in size, and then we would expect positive assortment, so they would have similar phenotypic traits for mating. For my methods, I mainly sampled throughout the months of July and August. There was no particular days I went out, it was just whenever I had the time. My study site was Skytop Park in Syracuse, New York. It's not necessarily a typical park, but it was this big open field behind their off-campus housing, and it just had tons of spotted knapweed. They had trails you could go through, and that's where I chose to go. For looking for samples, I would go through the paths, and you just would have to look at each individual flower, and when we came towards looking what a mated pair would look like, they would be directly on top of each other, so that's what we knew what to grab. We labeled these clear plastic bags. Here is what I used to put them in, and we would just put a flower code, so flower A or flower B, and we would put the weevils inside there. If there was any other ones on that flower, we made sure to collect them, but keep them separate from the mated pair. And I did put them in the freezer just to preserve them until the semester started, and I was able to analyze them in the lab downstairs. The first thing we did when we pulled them out was I sexed each of them under the dissecting scope, and I made this chart to just kind of show you what I used to sex them. So the females generally had a wider abdomen that came to a flatter point, and the males were more slender in size and came more so to a point, and you can kind of see with this one here, it kind of tapers at the end. We measured body length and width just to get some different measurements, and I used the calipers that are shown on the side there, and I included the pictures just to show some guidelines of what I used as length and width. I recorded them on paper, which I later put into Excel for my statistical analysis. So my first chart that I made for my statistical analysis was comparing just the average male and female sizes, which included body length and body width. So this is my box plot for that. The females are shown in the red colors and the males are in the green. So they're generally within the same range, but the females do just plot a little bit higher than the males. Overall, I had 73 different spotted knapweed flowers with around 179 different measurements, and that's male and females included in one. And so females were larger overall, and we just ran a correlation with male and female body length and width, and they were highly correlated. So we just decided to go with body length for the further statistical analysis instead of having to do it for body length and body width. So the next chart, I plotted the female body length in relation to male body length and came up with the correlation regression chart that I have here. My R-square valued was 0.13, so it's not a strong correlation, but as you can see, there is a slight positive relationship with my data points. So as the male body length increased, their mated pair was generally larger and in the same range as the male. And my p-value was less than 0.001, so even though there was a slight correlation, it was statistically significant. So there is some sort of relationship within my data. And we concluded from this one that there is positive assortment. So as I explained, the males, as they get larger, the females tended to be larger in size, generally. The last chart that I made was of my 73 flowers, I pulled the 17 of them that had an unmated male along with the mated pair. We plotted it out here so you could just see this is just body length as well. Females are still in the red color, the males are in the black points. Males, again, tended to be closer in size to the female, but there were 3 out of the 17 flowers where the unmated male was larger than the female, and that would be those top 3 green points where it's above the pink point. So generally for the most part, the mated male was smaller than the female. So overall, my conclusion for the 2 species, the females were generally larger in size, which was again to be expected. Given the background information, they gave us a range and they were like, this is what typically we would look for. The males tended to mate with females closer in size, so when it comes to mating, the males have to be able to climb on top of the female and hang on to her throughout the mating process. So if that male was too large or too small, they might not be able to successfully do that. The female may not even want to mate with a male that's too large or too small, and it may reject her or the male. So there is some sort of factor in there, not necessarily if size is a factor. The other point was males can be choosing larger females dependent on if the outcome is better for them. So you see a larger female, may produce a lot more eggs, better quality offspring, so it could be just a similar factor to that. But there was no specific indicator in my charts or my data that showed size specifically was the reason for the choice in mating. There could be other reasons for the assortive mating, so although it was present, it wasn't necessarily related to the size. We did get a pretty good variation of some males being larger, some being smaller. There were some times where they were significantly smaller, and it could be because we're dealing with the 2 different species. Because they are so closely related, we went with both of them. So if we had gone with just one, we could have gotten more detailed results relating to the size. but again, they were both closely related, so we'd have to do further analysis to either pick one out or decide to choose between the both. But there could be pheromones related to it if the female releases certain pheromone. That could also be attracting the male, and then color, the hairs on the body. So those were my main conclusions that I caught from it, but you would have to do further tests and more samples to most likely get different conclusions from that. Any questions?